Good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission on Monday, July 12, 2010. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Jamian? Commissioner Armenian? Commissioner Chan?
Present.
Commissioner Miller?
Present.
Commissioner Yao?
Present.
President Yao.
Thank you. Present. Next item, please.
Item number 2, consent items. Item number 2A, approval of the April 5th, 2010 meeting minutes.
Do I have a motion to approve the April 5th meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion that the minutes be approved as they stand.
Is there a second?
Well, for the May minutes, I noticed there were quite a few of typo errors in the back, so please have those corrected before you finalize. Yeah. Thanks.
So, Council, do we need to wait for the typos to be fixed before we approve? Okay. Thanks.
Sounds like there's a motion to approve the minutes with the amendments to the typographical errors. So if Commissioner Chan were to make that motion and it were to be seconded by another party, then you could proceed.
Well, Commissioner Miller made the motion, and then Commissioner Chan seconded, as long as the typos are corrected.
So it's an amendment to the original motion. So that's, if it's in accordance with Commissioner Miller, then you can proceed and vote.
Perhaps it's prudent to postpone approval of the minutes until the next meeting, and we have an opportunity then to see the corrected version of the typos. Typos is a rather vague statement. I don't know exactly what it means.
Okay. So you were considering, I understand, the minutes of the April 5th meeting. Mm-hmm. So you still need to consider the May 3rd meeting, unless you'd like to move to continue discussion of both meeting minutes to the next regular commission meeting.
I didn't notice any problem with April.
Yeah, I think there wasn't a second
Just the May.
into amendments, so we'll postpone the April 5th minutes to the next meeting, and then let's move over to 2B for approving the May 3rd meeting minutes.
I was referring to the May minutes, where there were probably over 10 typos
Okay, so
at the very end part. So I was referring to the May minutes. I have no problem with the April minutes.
okay, let's head back to 2A, approval of the April 5th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve that minute?
I make a motion to approve the April 5th minutes as they currently read.
I second.
And second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the April 5th meeting minutes is approved. Let's go to 2B, the approval of the May 3rd meeting minutes.
Item 2B, approval of the May 3rd, 2010 meeting minutes.
The discussion on that, Commissioner Chan?
I move to wait till the typo corrections are made, and then we will approve in the next meeting.
I don't think we need the motion to that. We just discussed that we'll delay
Well, if there's
that.
no objection, it can be approved as is.
Yeah, approve as is. So we'll move on to, we'll move the May 3rd meeting minutes to the next meeting for approval. Next item, please.
Item 3, reports. Item 3A, request for GWP Commission recommendation to City Council to support GWP's participation in the California University Northridge College of Engineering and Computer Science Honors Cooperative Internship Program. Ramona Blake.
And before you start, Mr. Bragg, just note that Commissioner Armenian just arrived, for the record. Thank you.
It's on.
In GWP's participation in the Cal State Northridge Honors Internship Program. Through this program, honor students will intern with GWP to gain valuable experience in the electric field while they're still learning the theories in the classroom. Here with us today to present more details about this program is Professor Bruce Osorno with Cal State University. He's a professor in the electrical and computer engineering. He's also the director of the Honors Co-op program and the lead faculty member in the electrical power systems area. So, Professor Osorno.
Good afternoon. We have an honor school program that has been with us for over 20 years. It's been a very successful program in which private industry has been involved, and they hire our students in internship mode, which is 20 hours a week. They pay them a decent salary, and during the summer they work full-time. That's part of the agreement that we have. At the end of their internship, most students get a job offer by the industry in which what we call that they hit the road running, simply because they've been doing this internship and they get a job offer and they keep doing what they've been doing for a whole year. Our program is geared into, it's a little different from regular internships because our students earn academic credits, and which enhances their resume. They get a certificate after a completion, and it benefits the sponsor and the students. So this is a program that we call it the win-win situation. For the employer gets, the future employer of the intern, get to know the intern's abilities before hiring. They get involved in projects in which the students get an invaluable experience that they can make decisions to what classes to take and which ones not to take. We happen to know that we can have a direct pipeline of students from our campus to the industry involved in this program. In this case, we have a very low cost for the Glendale Water Power, and the ultimate goal for us is to create synergetic relationships. I can talk to you about some that we already have with other industry, and it works for us. The requirements are very simple. The undergraduates, they need to have a minimum of a 3.0 at CSUN, and let me tell you, at the School of Engineering at CSUN, to have a 3.0 or higher, it's a very, very decent GPA. They need to pass a upper division writing exam, so they need to be fluent or they need to be able to communicate properly. They need to be enrolled in 300 level courses and have completed 24 units at CSUN. Since we have a lot of transfers from community colleges and other institutions, we have these rules so that the students go through a certain amount of filters that we put. They need to be at least 12 months to graduation. The honors co-op program is a full year cycle, 2 semesters and a summer. And so if the students start in August 1st, they will end in August 1st of the year after. We believe that we make them be internet savvy. Our graduates, our graduate students, they have to have a 3.5 CSUN GPA minimum, have passed the writing exam. They need to have at least 9 units at CSUN, 12 months to our graduation, and again, be internet savvy. We call this that this is not an ordinary internship. They earn 6 units. We make a combination of those units. Probably if they are international students, they take 1 unit during the summer, 2 units in the fall, and 3 units in the spring, or any combination that they might have. They take the classes for grades, so they are committed. This is not they take it seriously, very seriously, let me tell you, because there is a grade that is involved. The grades are based on, they need to write reports at the end of the semester. We perform interviews with the supervisors, and we end up knowing what the professional conduct and their behavior is. They have evaluations by faculty and supervisors, and we encourage teamwork, which is extremely important for us. The selection process, once the students apply, we go through, there is no changes. We go through certain meetings and interviews. And in this area, we're very flexible with industry. We go with what they require or what they want. We are not that strict about it, so we are a little more flexible. If they want to interview them only in their companies, we send the students to be interviewed. We prefer that they come to our campus so that we can chat with industry and then get feedback right there and then send the students over the company. They get emails, notifications. This is our co-op program historically for actually 2005, 2006, 7, and 8. I don't have the numbers for 9 and 10. That's another slide, but it's a little small. The number of companies that we have had, which is the in the first in this one, and this is the probably 2005 and 2006 is shrunk, the economic crisis that we have had. But again, we have had companies that they've been very supportive because in the past they gained a lot from our students, and those are the Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Edwards Air Force, a great deal of high-tech companies. The number of interns has been going up steadily, slow but steadily, and so we are recovering. And this is how our program is. And by the way, one last final note, our program is a self-supporting program. We don't use state funds to run this program. This program is self-supporting. That's why there is a fee that is requested from the company. And as I said, we have been running this for almost 20 years. It's been very successful. At the peak, we had around 25 companies. At the low, we have now 5 or 6. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
I think this is a great program. It is a win-win. I myself was an engineering major in college, and I went to UCLA, but I had to study digital circuit design. Mm-hmm. So there was no exposure to power, any such courses. So my question is there currently a power engineering program in CSUN?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. It's been with us since I came in. I was the power man almost 20 years today.
And are these applicants strictly coming from that school? No? The program is for the college, mm-hmm. and all the companies we have in one of the packets, the companies sent us, whatever company, let's say Edwards or Northrop or Amgen, they sent the job application. They said we need a computer science that knows these software packages, a student to be an intern. So we have a database. We spot students. We match the students with the company. They interview at minimum 6 of them, and they pick 1 or 2, and they get for the second interview, and usually they hire them. But that goes for every area of expertise. In this case, digital, control, electronics, microwaves, power. Mm-hmm. And so for power, you will select power engineering students?
Oh, absolutely. For power, I have an invested interest. It would come from my classes. I know my students, so this is what I do. If it was for other area, and then we cannot spot exactly what they want, we talk to the professors directly to recommend. So that's how we do it.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
You're very welcome.
And looking in here, I notice it costs like $16,000 a year for one student. And in here, there was a description saying the fee associated with participating as a sponsor in the program is $3,500 for the first student intern and $500 per additional student/intern. So my question now is to Glenn. Are we thinking of hiring more than one?
Yes.
Okay. Do we know how many?
No, not right. Unless
not yet.
Unless no.
The thought right now is maybe start with 2. What we're trying to do is we're expecting some retirements coming up, and rather than filling those positions right away, is try to bring in some interns. And since we're going to be hiring from the bottom up and learn from this, and if to the extent that this works, maybe we can extend this to the other sections of our GWP, mainly the power plant, where they're also hurting for new talents coming in.
Within engineering or outside of engineering?
Engineering.
Engineering, okay. All right, great, thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, I had some questions also. I saw the form here. This is a form from the university. Do we have forms internal to GWP for evaluation of the students?
Yes, we'll probably use the same evaluation form we use for our current employees. And,
Okay.
and basically we'll, in that form that asks for qualifications that we're looking for, it also will be specifying the job functions that they'll be doing for the period of the internship, and we'll see how well they do in those basically requirements that we have, that they have to meet.
Would there be periodic performance evaluations with the interns so that they can see how they're performing and make corrections?
It would coincide with the end of the semester because that's part of their grade.
Okay, so you just anticipate one per semester?
That is correct.
Okay. The compensation, I take it, doesn't involve any indirect benefits or anything like that? Okay. The selection procedure, is there a way of assuring that there will be no effective nepotism or anything like that, or has that been taken into account?
We haven't thought about it, but I don't think there will be a nepotism issue. We have a policy against that in the city to begin
Okay.
with.
All right.
So it will be consistent with our hiring policy.
Okay. I'm just anticipating questions as you go to council. I think when you do that, you want to be able to show them that there's a formal selection procedure that has quality assurance involved. Will there be training for the interns on interviewing skills? Do you anticipate that?
Yeah. Our applicants, they all have training in resume writing and interview skills.
So that's actually handled on the university
Yes, at the
side?
university.
I see,
We do
I
that,
see.
right.
Okay, but mock interviews within the utility, have you considered that?
No, we haven't considered that. It's, we'll probably learn a lot from this first go-around and see how
Okay.
we can improve it.
Of course, we can't project a hiring rate from this program with much certainty because we haven't any experience with it, but I think if you do the mock interviews, you will, a mock interview training effort will probably help you in terms of getting a recovery and being able to show a positive return on the investment per intern. I would suggest you look at that. Let's see. When during the summer, the students will be working full-time, I take it. And then when classes are on, they'll set up a schedule, or they're not to work at all, or how does that work?
Yes, our experience is, by rule, they cannot work any more than 20 hours. And our experience is that most employers, if not all, they are very flexible with the students in terms of exams. They fulfill the 20 hours, but they are flexible with the schedule because they can take classes.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to make the presentation to us, and I do want to state I see this as very positive for both the city and the students in the school. And thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Just one question. Do you have any experience in conducting this program with other utilities in the area?
No, this would be the first one. In terms of, in the past, they used to hire them directly. And
From your power track specifically?
Thanks.
And do you have a track record of placement of students regardless of this program?
Yes.
In other utilities?
No, we don't. I don't keep track of that. Well, I can get that information if you want to, but no, we don't.
Thank you.
Miller has the follow-up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was one other question here I meant to ask. You've already anticipated space for the students that you intend to hire. You have that plus phones, PCs, or other equipment that may be needed?
That's correct. What this would do is we also have some internship program informally set up with Glendale Community College that are up and rising. In fact, out of that, we've been able to hire some students permanently. In this case, we do have spaces available, and they'll have all the tools they need to succeed.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to comment, thank you, Professor Osuna, for a great presentation. I think it's a great program as well. But I was wondering if you can clarify what is the difference between this program, the co-op program, versus a regular internship program where students can apply to other companies or other utilities over the summer?
Yes, this is a very serious internship program. The students they take the internship program for a grade, they are, we call it honors because they have to have the grade to be to have access to this program. So from experience, personal experience, most companies, they want the cream of the crop. They want the top students. And to be able to have access to them, this is what we provide. That is a big difference. And it is as I said, a self-supported program, that's all it is, and very successful historically. And that's a big difference, I think.
So it sounds like there's two-way commitment between GWP and CSUN as well, so that you filter the students through the utility, and utility is accepting those applications and interns for the summer. Mm-hmm. So there's no competition with other utility for these students. Is that the model here, so that we can?
Yes. Yes. No. They actually companies in general, as you know, they go to the placement offices in every campus and they look for interns. They just put a post and anybody goes and applies. But what we do, we receive direct requests from. That's the reason why this program was created, is because we were receiving direct requests from companies to get the students with certain GPAs. They wanted the top students. It turns out that we couldn't have had access to them on the regular basis. So what we do, we have databases, we have applications, we have a lengthy process to qualify to be an honors co-op student. Once we spot them, then we place them with the companies, and so that is a big difference. We do the screening, we do the selection, and this is what the companies get to gain. It is you don't waste your time, the students learn, you learn, and ultimately it's an added benefit for everybody.
Right.
That's what we do.
Yeah, and I have a question about the pay. I mean, I'm all for paying students for this program, so I want to start out with that.
Me too.
And of course, considering the economy and what the utility is going through, and this type of program seems to be where you can offer the utility a free, the students time for free because it's an educational program. Is that under consideration, or are we definitely set on paying these students?
No, the students, this is another issue that we have. Our students, we request very strongly, actually we don't accept students to work for free for anybody. They ought to be paid. I feel for them, and nothing should be free. And even if they gain with experience, I strongly believe that they should be paid. And our fees, I didn't put them there, but they keep rising. We have an internship program with Spectral Lab in Silmar, which is the solar energy panel manufacturer. They were on the top. They were paying $30 an hour to our interns. That was one of the top ones. Amgen pays very well. And so we know, and I know it depends on the companies and how much budget they have, but still the range of payment for our students is between $15 and $30 now, an hour.
So we'll be able to go to the city council and say that we're getting a good deal, that the Glendale Water and Power is getting a good deal with these students and interns. Can you legitimately say that the utility is actually getting a good deal with what you're proposing here?
Oh yes, I believe so. I think that to get a quality engineer that would be producing and young and energetic, we believe this is a difficult thing to do nowadays, especially in power and certain areas. Now, for our students to have the experience, that's the most invaluable thing. This is my take is about the students. If they can have hands-on experience and be paid for it and do what they have to do, you'll be surprised how motivated and how successful they become. And she mentioned the internships at UCLA. Every other institution tries to have these internships. Some are good, some are not that good because there is some lack of quality control, as we call it. But again, the students gain this invaluable experience that if you want to think about it, you are supporting their education. And that's what I'm here to request.
Any other questions?
I would like to make a comment. In my experience in Los Angeles, they have a student engineer program there, and they have been hiring about, on average, over the past 4 years, about 40% of the students. I suspect it's a little bit low because of the current economic situation. A more favorable economy, it probably would be higher. So for 40% for a recessionary economic environment is a pretty good return, I would say.
Yes, I agree. Any other questions or discussions? So I think there's a motion, a recommended motion to be supported by City Council for this program. If there's no other discussions or comments, let's have, is there a motion to recommend this support to the City Council?
Well, I'm willing to make a motion to recommend to City Council to support GWP's participation in the California State University Northridge College of Engineering and Computer Science. Is that correct?
Yes, perfect.
Honors Cooperative Internship Program.
Perfect.
Is there a second? And Commissioner Meehan seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move to item 4, George, let's shift all communication to 5 because we have to be out here by 6:15, so I'm not sure how long the reports will take. So let's, if you don't mind, General Manager Steiger, that will okay with that? So we have one speaker only, so we don't want to keep him waiting. Mr. Aram Kazazian, please.
Good afternoon, members of the Commission. Good afternoon, Mr. Steiger. How are you doing? You know, I just came over here to ask a couple of questions. It's really disappointing to see that our water rates are going to go up again. Due to the turn of the economy, you know, the economy is very bad outside. If you deal with the normal people day to day, you'll know that people are struggling to make the home payments. In my area alone, there are a number of people have not been able to pay the homeowners' dues. And not only that, they can't pay the utilities. It's bad. And then we'll say, well, if they cannot afford to, the tenants cannot afford to pay the rent, the water rates, they can't afford to stay in Glendale, they should move somewhere else. That's what we're doing. We're removing people. We should in turn look how we can cut our costs and go the other way around. You know, all materials have come down. If you look at concrete, 4 years ago, we were paying $120, $125 a yard. Now it's come down to $65 a yard. The piping has come down in price. Copper has dropped. All the pumps we buy, it's come down in price. So we can't say that the cost of equipment materials has gone up. We need to find ways. Maybe this commission or the city should find ways to reduce and help those people to stay in Glendale instead of saying, well, if you can't afford it, go somewhere else. That's what, in turn, we're doing. You know, economy is going to go to the worst. If you look at the commercial industry, it's hurting very badly. Restaurants are hurting. All the small commercial mama-papa stores are all hurting. They can't afford to pay their water utility bills. If you go down there, people can't even turn their lights on because they can't afford it. There's no business. So we need to help those people stay in Glendale. They have established here for many years instead of trying to push them that way around. That's what I'm asking. We should do that. Remember, 3 years ago, this commission approved a 36% water rate hike in the city of Glendale. That 36% was going to go only for maintenance. That's what was promised 3 years ago. And I don't know where we are. Were we using that money for the maintenance or repair of the underground system, or is going to different departments? We have no record of what's going on. Now another 4%, that's 40%. It's really, it's becoming a burden on the people. I'm talking not on my behalf, I'm talking for everybody in Glendale. I deal with a lot of different tenants. They can't afford to pay a rent. They're all behind on their dues. Then they can't afford to pay the water bill. It's really becoming very hard on people. So we really need to consider that. Thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Oh, Commissioner Amin.
I'd like to thank Mr. Kazazian for his comments, but you stated it as if the rates are going up, and I don't think that decision, that sort of final decision has been made yet. At their last joint study session, the proposal was certainly presented by the GWP. There was discussion between the commission members as well as the city council members, but there will still be opportunity for public comment on that issue. It is not a finalized decision yet at this point.
And just want to clarify that 3 years ago, when the rates went up by 36%, it was over a 3-year period. And as Mr. Gavuna said in the past, that increase was due after 0 increases from the previous years. So that was a necessary increase that the utility had to incur because there wasn't any increases for the past 4 or 5 years. So we had to make up for it with that.
I'd also like to mention that the utility has been successful in reducing rates, at least on the electrical side. We've had a 9% reduction related to the landfill gas contract renegotiation, and hopefully we'll have some more. I know that work is going on to try to reduce that even further.
Thank you. And let's go back to item 4. George, next item.
Item 4, General Manager, reports and information. Mr. Steiger.
Thank you. President Yao, members of the Commission, I have 3 issues to discuss today. And the first one is our quarterly risk management update. And I'm going to ask our Assistant General Manager of Power Supply, Steve Lenz, to give a brief overview.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Steve Lenz, Assistant General Manager of Supply for Glendale Water and Power. I'm going to give you a quick update today on our risk management program. Glendale Water and Power continues to work with RMI, which is Risk Management Incorporated, with Bill Fox's group to check counterparties, oversee settlements, and coordinate enabling agreements. In addition to our work with RMI, we're working with the Energy Authority on our hedging program. And I've handed out a single-page chart, which should be in front of you, that looks like this with 4 colored lines on it. The purpose of our hedging program is just to stabilize prices for Glendale Water and Power customers. On the chart that I've handed out, it summarizes the percentage of our system that is subject to market and how much of that price is hedged or not. So as you're looking at the chart, at the bottom line there, that's 0%, that really is 55% hedged. 55% of our system is locked in through long-term purchases and project ownership. So what's left is 45% of our system that's subject to market prices.
Pardon, is it possible to put this on the screen so the viewers can see it, or is that possible?
I don't think so. I've got just hard copies today.
All right, pardon the interruption. Please continue.
No problem. So this chart represents the 45% of our system that's variable and subject to market. As you look at the chart, there's 4 lines on that chart. And this depends on different opportunities that the market provides to us. But if you look at August 10th on the bottom axis, August 10th, and you go up, there's a line on this graph that has a little star on it. That's the nominal hedge percentage. And so on August 10th, you'll see a star right at about the 70% mark. So that represents that as of the upcoming month, August 2010, 70% of our variable system load is hedged, which basically means that approximately 86.5% of our total system needs are fixed or locked in. So as we enter the month of August 2010, we've only got about 14% of our system needs that are subject to market prices. And this is how we, over time, try to lock in the prices for our customers. You'll notice that these lines over time go down from left to right. And generally, our policy for hedging is that the further out in time we go, the less we like to hedge because we would like to see what happens and see what develops in the market. And these 4 different lines are limits for us. This bottom line is the absolute minimum of our system that we'd like to have hedged on a programmatic basis. We try to fill that system need and lock in those prices no matter what. If we're presented with particularly good market opportunities, we may fill higher levels of our system. And I don't have a chart here to determining how we do that. The bottom line is if market prices dip substantially below normal volatility levels, we'll step in and buy some of our needs for those time periods where it falls below those certain volatility curves. You'll notice that there's a couple of lines on here. As I mentioned, the first line is one with a star. That's our nominal hedge amounts. That basically means let's just say our volume is 100 million MMBTUs. That's exactly represents 100 million MMBTUs of futures contracts or options to cover that volume. Over the past couple of months, we're moving to a new program which is called Delta Hedging. And there's a line on here that's hard to see because it's overlapping that first line at the bottom. It's purple circles, and that's the delta hedge percentage. And so the 70% that I first mentioned to you on August 10 actually drops down almost all the way down to 35% when delta hedging is taken into account. Next time we come to you, we're going to come to you with a more detailed explanation of our delta hedging program, but basically adjusts the amount hedged based on how the underlying options are reacting to prices in the market. So that, I think, kind of concludes this overview. This gives you kind of one-page visual snapshot of how much of our system needs, our prices are locked in. And as I mentioned, next time we come, we'll come to you with a little more detail on the new Delta hedging program and our new system that tracks that program. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I noticed that your nominal hedge percentage, which is the asterisk that is now near 70% on August 10th, is declining at a steeper rate than your limit. So I take it that means that in the proximate future you anticipate that there will be opportunities in the market attractive enough for you to divest some of your fixed contracts. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, no, the lowest line on this chart is the minimum that we want hedged.
Right.
Okay? Then as those lines move up, those are maximums that we want hedged, and those maximums are based on market determinants. So the asterisk that you're pointing out, that just means that at some point in time in the past, we had a really good buying opportunity.
Okay.
So we were able to hedge prices up to that 70% level.
Yeah.
We had a buying opportunity that was so good that it went to our second maximum level as determined by market determinants. So in the past, when that opportunity came, we bought. And that's all that means. That purple line with the asterisks is just the amount of our system needs that are locked in now in price.
Okay, I see.
So as of today, for the month of August 2010, about 70% of our variable needs are locked in price.
Okay. And then I take it that your base load is that 16% fixed based on the numbers you provided in your earlier talk?
It's actually 55%. So
base load is.
Right. So this zero at the bottom,
yeah.
What's below that is actually 55% of our system that's basically locked in by long-term agreements and project ownership. We've got all these outside resources like IPP and San Juan and Palo Verde and several wind projects and Tieton, small hydro. All of those are either very long-term purchases or outright project ownership. And so those are all locked in. There is a variable fuel component to those projects, but for most purposes, those are kind of sunk costs for 55% of our system needs.
And who decides on the purchases? Is that at the general manager level, or how do you work that out?
Purchases for purposes of these levels of hedging? Well, they're kind of predetermined. They're governed by a risk management policy, and implemented by our traders, our internal risk manager, and our external hedging consultant, which is the Energy Authority.
Okay.
And so what happens is, as on a day-to-day basis, they look at this chart and they say, are we meeting our minimum, which is that bottom line?
Yes.
If they haven't fixed a minimum of the system, they go out and buy those. And they don't have to do it immediately. I mean, we want them to have a little discretion to read the tea leaves and, make the purchases at the right time. And then day by day, they look at the market, and they look at the market for every month that's covered on this chart. They look at the future for every month out, and they look at volatility bands around those prices, and they say, is this a good buying opportunity today for any of these months?
So the traders are at the staff level, they're making the decisions, I take it then?
Yes.
And those are subject to review at the managerial level later on to see if the rules can be improved?
Correct. And RMI, Risk Management Incorporated, and Bill Fox Group is working together as our internal risk manager to basically oversee settlements and to make sure that we're complying with risk management policy.
Is your your trading rules, are those benchmarked against other utilities, or are those available? Are those kind of like a proprietary type?
Well, the models that we use to make decisions on when we buy are proprietary.
Right.
We actually are in the process of developing trading metrics for our group to figure out how do we measure their performance, a real-time, day-ahead term compared to industry or compared to peers, and we are in discussions with consultants on exactly how you do that. And it's a little bit different in the private sector. They just do a straight P&L, profit and loss on their trades, but we don't operate that way. So we're exploring different metrics that we'll be able to implement to measure performance.
And I wanted to ask, how do you measure the success of the program or what the city is gaining by it? I know this has popped up before, but perhaps you can give some elaboration based on recent performance on that.
Well, there's different, if you're talking about the hedging program, where we're kind of looking at how much price stability we're getting for how much premium. And right now we're playing around with how much do we want to spend and what is it that we're after. And this kind of plays into our new Delta hedging program, because with the Delta hedging program, you can stay real close to market, or you can give it a wider band, and if you've got a wider band and let prices move a little bit more, you don't spend as much on premiums. And so we're in the process of having somewhat of a philosophical discussion of how much protection do you want for how much premium right now, and we haven't quite nailed that down, but we can bring some of that discussion back to you, as I mentioned, at the next quarterly update with a discussion of the new Delta hedging program, if that's of interest.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I think the public would want to see how they're benefiting from the program. Let me just state that I'm confident that the public is seeing benefits, but if there's some way of quantifying or characterizing that, it provides some assurance to the ratepayers that they're getting some value for this, and that's really what I think the purpose of talking about it before the commission is about.
Sure, and I can tell you our overall philosophy is really to kind of protect against blowouts and let the ratepayers take advantage of downside prices.
Right.
So it's really kind of almost like a price cap insurance type of program.
Right. And when we're protecting the ratepayers from shock.
Right.
Yeah.
From price shock.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh, no, I agree with that, Mr. Miller. And I just want to maybe reemphasize that point, that we want to know if this program is working to the benefit of the ratepayers. And one of the ways to know is to compare to other benchmarks or metrics that you mentioned, that we are having some benefits, and how do we prove that benefit? Can we look at maybe out in the future, then 6 months later? I mean, as I recall, this program started maybe a year ago, right, when we hired RMI, and so potentially we could have some data to back in to see if we actually made money. If we hedged from back last summer to this summer, and this is this summer now, what would we have done if we didn't have this program in place? Would we be paying more than what we would have? And so those are the type of questions that, if you can answer them, that can really help ratepayers understand if this program is really meaningful.
I think you're right. I think we do have some data that we can back test, and as soon as we kind of get all our tools in place, we'll be glad to take a look at that. And once again, it's part of that discussion of How much do you want to spend for how much protection? This came up, we were talking to one of the consultants, and I guess at one of the, I don't think it was PG&E, but one of the bigger IOUs, they had spent a certain amount of premium on their hedging program, and someone came in and contested it and said, well, if you just let it go, you'd be better off. Well, by definition, if you can take the price swings over time, your average price is still going to be the same and you will have paid no premium. So there is a discussion to be had there, and we'll do some back testing and bring that to you.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Lenz.
You know, the cost of doing this, is it budgeted out of your purchase power and fuel?
Yes.
Or, yes? Okay, so that's under power management?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, thank you, Mr. Lenz. You're welcome. Next item, please.
Item 4B, financial update. Bill Fox. I'm sorry.
Wait a minute. Did he?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Item 4A.
4A2, I think is where you are.
4A2, GWP staffing update.
Thank you. I'd like to give a brief update on what our organization looks like at the moment, and also our staffing requirements. And if I look back over the last 5 years to give you an indication of what GWP's staffing has looked like, for the fiscal year 06-07, we were at 425 full-time employees. That number held steady for the 07-08 year and the 08-09 year. So for those 3 years, we were at 425 full-time employees. In the 09-10 fiscal year, we reduced full-time employees down to 416. And for this year, the 10-11 fiscal year, we are at 408 full-time employees. So we've reduced our overall workforce, and we continue to look at ways to improve, while at the same time having increased pressures in certain areas of the business. One area is the one area you just heard from, our power supply area, which continues to require additional resources, and our initiative for smart grid, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But overall, we've reduced full-time employees. We have a vacancy of about 33 employees right now, so it's roughly 8%, which is above our stated goal in the strategic plan of 5% or less. So we now have an 8% vacancy rate for various reasons. But that gives you a general overview of our staffing levels as of right now. I'd like to just give you a quick snapshot of what the organization looks like today. Currently, we have 5 divisions within GWP. We have a financial division under Bill Fox, our water services under Peter Kavonis, electric services under Ramona Abweg, power supply under Steve Lenz, and customer and support services under Ned Basson. Each one of those report directly to the general manager, to myself. So we have a relatively flat organization. We have an administrative support staff, as you can see, of 5 people. Of course, we have, we're not fully staffed there right now, but we do have 5 in the administrative area. And on the chart, the external support services in legal and financial are services that we pay for from other parts of the city. So even though those employees show on our org chart, they're not part of the GWP organization, but we do pay for them. And of course, they're all valued employees to GWP. Under Ramona Abweg, we have the electric services area, which again is split into 5 areas. Compliance, as you can see to the far left of the chart, and that's NERC compliance, and that's an area that continues to grow, continues to have great influence on our overall operation, and only 3-4 years ago didn't exist at all. So this is an area that we have, we're quite concerned about its continuing growth, And of course, it has great meaning to us because the compliance, if we go out of compliance, it means major fines to us. So we put a lot of emphasis there. We have an electrical engineering section. We have a systems dispatch area, which is responsible for all of dispatch within the city. Also takes calls outside of the electric area for water and other city emergencies. So very, very important part of the electrical area. Then we have operations, which essentially is the area that is run out of the Utility Operations Center, or as we commonly call it, the yard. And that's where all of our line personnel, substructure, meter service people, transformer repairs, and so on are located. And then finally, you'll see to the right a section on AMI, and that is the smart grid piece. Now, keep in mind that smart grid goes across all functions of GWP. So at this point, every function that you'll see here has some involvement in AMI, either formally, as you see here, which is a dedicated piece, or informally, which is now integrated into the organization itself. Customer and support services under Ned Basson is a very, very wide in scope area. And it starts again to the left with responsibility for our safety, and that's a dotted line responsibility. Mr. Basson's area is responsible for the development of safety procedures and our safety manual, and has dotted line responsibility throughout the operation for operational safety. It's not a direct linkage in that our safety coordinators in the operations are part of that operation, so there's a dotted line relationship. Also, customer service, and customer service is the largest single piece by way of employees of that particular division, and that's under Tammy Valier, and is responsible for all of our meter reading, our customer call center, our billing, everything associated with customer service. The warehouse is also under that organization. Public benefits, which again is large in scope in terms of the amount of programs it's responsible for and its overall budget, is also part of this division. But very important to understand is the fact that public benefits has taken on the overall project management of our smart grid system. And so over the next few months, we will be revising, reorganizing, and increasing the staffing level of that area to accommodate the smart grid requirements. You can see a box up there for IT. We have a small IT section within this division that reports directly to GWP. It also has a matrix organization relationship with the city IT or ISD division, which is much larger, and it's taken on a larger role again due to the significant amount of interaction required through smart grid, because smart grid, although it appears to be mostly metering and equipment, is really a software-driven and communications-driven operation. So there's a very important piece there. Our facilities planning, construction, and operations is also in this area. Environmental affairs, which is very, very key to all areas. And again, this crosses over electric, power supply, and water. This is environmental affairs for all of GWP. And then finally, we have an HR function directly responsible for GWP HR. And again, there's a matrix type of organization back to the city HR department there. But as you can see, that particular division is very, very wide in scope, has significant responsibility in all areas, and right now is pretty much the centerpiece of our smart grid operation. This is power supply, and what you're seeing here is the latest organizational chart that we have just put in place. In fact, the green boxes there at the moment don't exist, but have been approved, and we're getting ready to move forward on filling those positions. But essentially you have three, and I'll say almost four, because safety is really, safety to the right is a part of the operation, although it shows up separately. But the three major pieces of power supply are power production, which is really the generation operations related to the Grayson Power Plant, and now the Shoal Canyon landfill gas operation. We have made some reorganizational moves there, and we are combining the operations with the engineering associated with the Grayson Power Plant, something that's very important and we think will provide a much more efficient operation at that location. Under energy marketing, we have bolstered the trading area, and you just heard a bit from Steve Linz on our hedging operation and our real-time trading, and that's all housed in that energy trading area, where we've now put an energy trading manager in there to oversee our own traders along with our contractors, which are ACES and the Energy Authority. A new group, Power Resource Management, is really, really critical to moving forward in many of the areas that are now becoming so important to us, not the least of which is renewables. Renewables and ultimately the NERC compliance area will end up in that area. I mentioned earlier that NERC compliance currently is in our electric services area. It will eventually shift over to be part of that group. We have a very definite need for an ongoing power contracts management function to manage the myriad contracts that we now have entered into, both for natural gas and for power purchasing agreements. And there's a lot of work associated with monitoring and managing the contracts on a day-to-day basis. So this is the overall area, the organizational chart for power supply. Our smallest division in people, but probably the most critical, is our finance and energy risk management area under Bill Fox. As you can see, it's a relatively small area, but responsible for all of our budgeting, all of our financial analysis and interaction, our risk management. It functions essentially as our middle office for our energy trading group. It's also responsible for our rate development area, which is now taking on more meaning as we move ahead. So there's a lot of responsibility here, a very critical area for us, and it's becoming more and more critical as we move ahead. This is half of our water division, and the way we've we show our water organizational chart really in two separate charts. This particular chart shows the engineering and water quality area of the water division under Peter Kavonis. As you can see, it's fairly spread out in terms of its responsibilities. Very, very important in that we monitor on a weekly basis, in some cases on a daily basis, the water quality throughout Glendale, and it's responsible for all aspects of our production and our purchase, along with the design of the system. The field operation for water has recently been changed. Previously, we had a single superintendent of water operations down at the Utility Operations Center, the yard. More recently, we've split that into two superintendents, and we actually have a much, much more efficient operation now. And that's what this particular chart shows. So that's overall the organization for GWP, and a couple of comments before I conclude. As we move ahead to a much more smart grid-oriented future, we are currently investigating, analyzing, and developing a new and different organization to accommodate the processes and the skill levels required to operate the smart grid in the future. So a year from now, 2 years from now, we will have a slightly different organization with a different skill set migrating towards a very, very different way of operating in both electric and water. And we're looking at that right now. But for today, what you see is an organization that works very, very well to keep the lights on and the water flowing. And as I've mentioned, just to again reiterate, we've reduced full-time employees from what had been a constant of about 425 down now to about 408. We currently have an 8% vacancy rate. So, any questions?
Yes, you mentioned that the number of employees had gone down from 425 to 408, which is a difference of 17. I counted your vacant spaces here in your organization chart, and there were 9.
That's not accurate. The organization chart, unfortunately, is not accurate.
This is only partial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I noticed there were references to other pages here. That,
yeah.
Okay, so this is partial then.
Right.
Okay. Thank you on that. I also wanted to ask you on your compliance under the electric services under Mr. Obueg. That's for NERC, you were saying.
Yes.
And is that then a new group, relatively speaking, past few years?
Yes. In fact, that whole function is only probably 2 to 3 years old, yes.
And consequently, is it safe to say that these staff were added as a result of regulations that were mandated at the state or federal level?
Actually, that staff was in place, and we added additional responsibility so as not to add staff. But as we move forward, and that function gets transferred over to the power supply area, we'll take another look at it.
Okay, so your staff didn't actually increase due to this; it was just rearranged.
Right.
The same, I gather, is true for your smart grid. You've not really added staff for it so much as you've just rearranged staff.
Not yet, no. Okay. But we will have to add staff in that area. In fact, we're poised right now to do so. Yes.
And by how much do you anticipate it would go up?
At this point, probably just an additional three staff members, but key staff members to bring the expertise that we need for that in-house.
Okay. Is Bill Fox's group matrixed with the city, or is it just unique to GWP?
Unique to GWP.
Okay. And your IT, that's also not gone up significantly. I mean, actually, overall, your number of your employees has gone down, so you've actually done well in that regard.
IT has gone down, but of course, in some cases, we've transferred some IT people over to the city IT group. That's correct.
Okay. I'll pass. I'm sure some other questions have to be asked.
Yes, I do. With Smart Grid Future, you mentioned that the skill sets are going to be different.
Yes.
Can you describe for us and as well for the audience what kind of skill sets are we transitioning from and to?
It will be much more of a communications IT-based operation rather than the manual physical type of operation as it is today.
Right.
For example, we read meters manually today. We have meter service people who, in many cases, are manual laborers who do physical work on that. Much of this will transition much more over to an IT environment, and what we are planning to do, in fact, we're starting right now, is to train those folks that are doing the work today to start to understand the communications and the IT requirements that we're going to need for smart grid. The other piece of it is that much of the smart grid's benefit is to the customer, and for the customer to understand what the benefits are and how the customers can use the smart grid data to their benefit. And so we'll also need the kind of skill sets that can work with customers to educate them and work with them.
So it sounds like we will require a much more technical skills, and are we going to be attempting to train our existing staff to be able to do that rather than
we've already started that. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mrs. Steiger, thank you for bringing this up. I think it's a great preview on what I think the City Council is asking for in terms of how this plays into the potential rate increase for the water side. First, can you tell us how many employees are under the water side, in your opinion, how many under the electric side?
Good question. It's a
Half and half?
No, it's not half. It's roughly 75% electric and 25% water. But that's a good question, and I should have those numbers off the top of my head.
Oh, no problem.
But that's roughly the split.
Okay, thank you. And then, so based on that, for the potential rate increase for the water side, people will look at this and the organization and they see that the water side, you got all these boxes there.
Right.
What can you tell the public how you're streamlining all these employees so that there's really no more to cut, or are there additional cuts that we can make so that there won't be a potential water increase?
What we've done, as you can see, we've reduced the overall number of employees for both electric and water. But more importantly, we've cut back on all the outside contractors and anything that we can that does not directly start to get to the point where we have to lay off people. So we've not done that. But we've gotten down to a point that just uses our own people for the most part. And what that's meant to us is we've had to push out a number of capital projects that we had originally proposed to do in our 5-year strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And we're going to show you next month what that physically means in terms of the projects that no longer fall within the 5-year plan, but now are in a 5 to 10-year plan. And the reason that's occurred is because by eliminating outside contractors and anything other than just the basics of what it takes to operate the system, we've pretty much eliminated our ability to do these projects. So that's really where we've reduced very much down to the bone, pretty much. So that's where we are. And we are at the point, quite frankly, that if we do need to cut back more, it will be start to cut back on people, and we'd prefer to not do that.
Just that those sort of type of questions will come up again.
Yes, they will.
I mean, I know you anticipate that all the time, but it's great to reinforce that to the public who's interested what your answer would be, because as you can see, there are a lot of boxes up there, and we want to make sure that we're doing all we can before we even consider a waterway increase.
Right. Sure.
Thank you.
I have a question. From our last joint study session with City Council, I remember, I believe it was Councilmember Friedman requesting or asking you this question: if we were to cut our budget 3.8%, so we don't raise the rates, where would you cut? I believe she asked that question. I don't remember when she wanted that to be reported. And I know we're going to be having a financial update today. Will we be able to cover that question?
I'm not quite sure we can cover that specific question, but I can honestly answer at this point. We would eliminate probably most of the other capital projects that we've kept, which are very few at this point, which means we would only be operating and maintaining the system, and our capital investment would just be pushed off. So that's how we would do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, I had one other question. In my experience, there's usually a divergence between management's perception of the organization's resource needs and the perception on the staff level. And do you periodically consult the staff regarding their assessment of resource needs and try to incorporate that into your plan for the organization?
That's something that's always one of my top priorities. So yes, this is a constant questioning and reinforcing and discussing as to how we can do that, yes.
Could you elaborate how you do that exactly? Is that periodic, or do you just do it as you meet people? Or
We do that, I'll say periodically, but it's probably almost on a weekly basis that we discuss some form of resource planning, yes.
Okay, very good.
Amin?
Yes, I guess I want to go at the rate increase issue and ask the question in a slightly different way. If you were not to get the rate increase, I heard you said you would push out capital projects. Are there impacts in terms of people impacts? Would you cut back on workforce? Would you freeze vacancies? What would you do from a people impact perspective?
Well, in fact, we've already frozen vacancies. Over the last month, on the water side, for example, we've lost 3 people, and we're not filling them at the moment until we see where we go with the rate increase. So we've already anticipated that. That would be one area.
So that would be so the people side of it would be one of the areas you would look for to find those to close the gap.
At this point, because we're very, that's pretty much where we are. Yeah, there's not a whole lot more to cut beyond that. So yes.
My second question has to do with a completely different category, but again, people related. Have you done any sort of analysis from a diversity perspective to analyze your representation in terms of minorities and your hiring practices to attract the appropriate levels of diversity into the workforce at GWP?
Yes, our HR department has those figures. I don't have them with me, but yes.
If at a future meeting you could present that issue, that would be, I would be interested in hearing about that.
Commissioner Armenian, there are some legal prohibitions on hiring just based on race or based on ethnicity. Certainly, the city is obviously an equal opportunity employer, but we can't specifically target any specific group for hiring. So just as that discussion comes back, that's something to bear in mind.
But if there's an analysis that says, you know, we have X percentage of minority, that's the kind of information I'd be looking for.
Understood.
Just to follow up on what Commissioner Armenian asked, I guess the question is, you're allowing some savings to occur by attrition, not backfilling vacancies, but you're not anticipating any kind of layoff or furlough program if the rate increase doesn't go through, I guess is what something that needs to be heard.
Not anticipating that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize, I agree with Commissioner Armenian on the diversity aspect of it. I don't think we're looking for changing any hiring practices. It's more of understanding what is already in place, the diversity of GWP staff. So I think that's a good idea to bring that up. Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you.
Nice job.
Item.
Thank you. Okay, the next item, strategic plan quarterly scoreboard report. Our quarter just ended, as you know, so the scoreboard isn't quite ready. So I'd like to defer that to next month. Plus, we've also done a recalibration of our strategic plan for a number of reasons. So I'd like to agendize that for next month along with this.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next item, please, George.
Item 4B, financial update, Bill Fox.
Well, good afternoon, members of the Commission. This afternoon I'm going to talk about a financial update for the GWP, and we're going to cover three different elements. First, we're going to talk about the budget for the new incoming fiscal year of 2010-11. Secondly, we're going to go over our projected results for the 9-10 year. At this point, the city's books have not been closed for the fiscal year 9-10. We have recorded data for 11 months. The last month is based upon our forecasted information, so it will be relatively accurate, but it's not 100% accurate. And as soon as the books are closed, then we'll provide you another update. And thirdly, we'll talk about capital projects. As Mr. Steiger indicated, we'll talk more in depth at our next meeting when we go over the 5-year and 10-year outlook on capital projects, but at least we'll touch that subject today. This particular slide here has to do with the electric and water utility as well as city transfers and taking a look at a totality basis. We're looking at both the O&M expenses as well as the capital costs and comparing our 2009-10 approved budget to our 2010 approved or adopted budget. And if you look at the bottom line comparing the two periods, you can see that between the 2 years, we ended up decreasing the total amount of expenditures, $33.7 million, or 8.7%. So the organization has definitely shrunk over these 2 years. The electric side of the business decreased $21.6 million, and the water $12.1 million. To take a little better look at this, we wanted to give you some further detail. The city as a whole, the budget for the entire city organization, which includes GWP, is $809.6 million. GWP, when you add up the electric and water pieces together, add up to 43.5% of the total city budget. We are $351.9 million. So we're a substantial part of the city operation. Mm-hmm. We've highlighted the utility operation in blue so you could get an idea of us, the city, versus GWP as two separate entities combined together. The electric utility, we've broken down into the major budget components that you will see in the budget book, and each of those are the major areas where the appropriations occur. As you can see, power management is the largest at 52.3%. Of that $149.5 million, approximately $100 million of that is related to purchased power and for the electric and gas and fuel purchases that we end up making. So a large part of it is related to the actual production of electricity. On the water side, you can see that the total appropriations are $65.9 million, and the largest portions in the water services. The water services area is the area where the purchased water comes in from Metropolitan Water District, as well as our own groundwater production and our distribution operations. As we get further into the presentation, we'll give you some additional details of how those break out. This past year, even though our budget went down 8.7%, we had another factor that the city operations have taken a look at, and this has to do with cost allocations. This is the third year that the city has actually done cost allocations where they've identified costs that were in the general fund previously, but more appropriately belong in other parts of the organization. In other words, costs are being allocated to the area of the organization where they benefit. Well, as a result of this further refinement of the cost allocation process this year, GWP ended up with a $2.2 million additional expense that we had not previously had to pay for. The two areas primarily are in the information services area and two in the overall city allocation. These were valid costs, and we went through an extensive study with the finance department and met with the information services department on these costs to make sure that they related to GWP operations. In the overall scheme of things, when you look at the GWP budget, it's less than 1%, but even still, $2.2 million was additional money that went into the GWP budget and took away from other program services that we could be providing. We wanted to share with you projected results. As I mentioned before, we have 11 months of recorded data, but we only have 1 month of forecast. So we have some relatively accurate information, but it will be subject to change. At the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate that we're going to be in a small loss position in both the electric as well as the water operations. In the electric operation, we anticipate a $400,000 loss. In the water operation, we anticipate an $800,000 loss, which ends up being collectively a $1.2 million negative, and the overall margin is a 0.5% negative for the year. In the electric side of the operation, the principal reason for our loss this year is the fact that the utility had budgeted approximately $5 million for wholesale revenue operations where we anticipated wholesale activities, and this year was a very tight year, and that activity didn't transpire like we thought it would. In essence, we ended up with a net income of about $1.6 million where we thought we were going to be at $5 million. So the opportunities in the marketplace weren't there, and this had a direct impact on the bottom line. We'll go into a little bit about the electric utility, and then we'll diverge into the water utility. First off, in the electric utility, we wanted to share with you, and this is a slide you've seen before. There have been some small updates to it. But for the 2009 budget to actual, you can see that the utility ended up in a positive, and we actually, in 2009 fiscal year end, ended up with a $6.8 million net income. Our budget for 2010 was a $4.1 million net income, and we, as I indicated before, we anticipate coming in with a $400,000 loss. We wanted to share with you what we thought were the reasons why the loss occurred, so we wanted to do a budget to forecast comparison of the revenues to give you an idea or a breakdown, and that'll be on the ensuing slide. In taking a look at our approved budget for 2011, we anticipate that we're going to come up with $9.6 million net income, and we're going to be doing this without any rate increase in this upcoming year. In going through and analyzing the 2010 budget versus projected revenue, the $61.2 million variance that you saw on the prior slide is broken down into 4 major reasons. The first reason is for $6.1 million, there's a variance because we had less retail sales than we had anticipated. This is primarily due to weather conditions and a turndown in the economy. The second area is our non-operating revenue, and this was due to less construction activity as well as less grant activity than we thought. The third area is in our adjustable revenue, and this is an area where the adjustables $26.1 million less, and this is due to the fact that the cost of fuel and purchase power was less than we had projected in our original budget formulation. In fact, the cost of fuel was at near all-time lows, and as a result, it did impact what our bottom line revenue was in this area. In addition, we talked about it earlier, we did provide a rate decrease of 22% on the adjustable side. So we passed along to the consumer the fact that the rates went down for us, we passed that down to the consumer. So there was a 22% rate reduction on the adjustable side, which translated into a 9% overall rate decrease. The fourth area that we talked about where the revenue was down was in the wholesale area, where in fact there was just less market opportunities than we anticipated. We have already seen a turnaround for this new fiscal year coming forward, but during this last fiscal year it was a very slow time, not only for ourselves but for our neighboring utilities. This ends up being why we had a $61.2 million revenue shortfall. We wanted to share with you a breakout of how our revenues look. Our revenues of $185.8 break down into various components, the largest of which is our retail sales, which is 91%. This includes both our residential customers as well as our commercial industrial end customers. We did have another 9% and spread among all the different other types of activities. The capital contributions, which is again when somebody does construction and they deed that to the city, we recognize that as a revenue. We had grants of $2.9 million, and then we also had interest income on our reserves of $2.6 million, and then our wholesale activity of $8.6 million. The expense breakdown of $186.2 million is broken down into the various components. The purchase power and fuel component of our overall expense is 53%. So 53% of our $186.2 million relates to purchase power and fuel purchases in order to produce electricity. 14% relates to employees' salaries and benefits. And it's interesting, if you take a look at GWP operation compared to other city operations, other city operations, salary and benefits run about 80 to 85% of the organization. For GWP, because we're out producing a commodity, it ends up being such a smaller part of the overall pie. It's 14% for salary and benefits. There's several areas that are 10% each. The fund transfer is $19.1 million. Our non-labor O&M costs, this is outside contractors, consultants that we use, are 10%. Depreciation is another 10%. And then our interest expense on our bonds is $5.8 million, or 3%. This gives you an idea of where the expenses are going for the operation. Going into the water utility, we wanted to share with you some of the trending and where we think we're going to be going forward. For the budget year 2009, we ended up in a relatively good position. We had budgeted $1.9 million net income. We ended up at 1.6 net income. For 2010, the utility had actually budgeted a $3.2 million negative, or a 7.2% negative margin. So the water utility had already anticipated and what we consider an overcollection on the variable side, and it actually ended up trying to reduce some of the variable costs that we had and ended up in a negative situation. The forecast, however, we actually are doing better than we thought we would from a budgeted standpoint. We had budgeted a $3.2 million loss. We're going to end up at an $800,000 loss. Going forward, the budget for the 2011 period is at a break even, and we anticipate that would include the 3.8% Prop 218 net rate increase. We talked a little bit earlier in the meeting today, if in the event that we don't get that rate increase, that will have an impact, and we'll have to examine the operations to determine where items would have to be cut. Looking at our projected 2010 fiscal year water revenues, 90% of the revenues come in from our retail sales to our residential as well as commercial industrial customers. Another 4% comes in from our recycled water sales. 3% comes from our revenues and grants, and then there's minor amounts for interest income as well as capital contributions from construction. On the expense side, I've colored in two areas what I consider blue, and one is the Metropolitan Water District purchases. In 2010, the projected number is $12.3 million, which accounts for 31% of the expenses. And then there's another $4.9 million, which relates to our groundwater production as well as our distribution. So when you pump the water out as well as being able to distribute it, there's pumping costs that are involved. So when you take into account the purchased water as well as the groundwater distribution and the actual pumping of the water, that equates to 44% of our budget, which is $17.1 million out of the $38.4 million. In looking at the other components of the expenses, salary and benefits compose $7.9 million, or 21%, very similar to what you saw on the electric side as far as the overall employee costs. The fund transfer is $4.2 million, or 11%. Then we also have depreciation of $3.2 million, interest expense $2.2, and then we have non-labor O&M. Those are where we use contractors for certain specialized services and activities that we don't perform internally. So in total, you have $38.4 million worth of expense. Going on to capital projects, In evaluating capital projects, you can see when we compare our budgeted activity, we're keeping at what I consider a relatively steady state. As Mr. Steiger said, we're trying to do the bare minimum requirements at this point. Our budget for 9-10 of $86.3 million did include a substantial amount of funds for the AMI project. That's why we've highlighted the electrical services and the water services area in yellow to identify the fact that they are the major components. And in fact, a large portion of both of those relate to the AMI project that's currently being built. As that project gets completed, then those numbers will go down substantially. Under the electrical services, if you take a look at the two biggest components, you have the distribution system improvements that are being made, and then the AMI infrastructure. If you take those two together, that's 88% of the total capital for the electric services system. The other items are relatively minor in nature. On the water services capital side, we have this year approved $24.1 million. Of that, $14.1 million is related to the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Project, or the AMI project. So again, the lion's share of the different types of capital improvements is coming in that one area. The other areas are doing what we call maintenance mode, and we're doing the bare minimum because of the cost that we have set up in the AMI project. As Mr. Steiger indicated, at our next meeting, we're planning on going further into a 5-year and 10-year look on where we need to handle our capital projects. Because right now, at this point, we're doing the bare minimum, and we have deferred a number of projects out beyond our 5-year horizon, and we feel that it's necessary to share that information with you.
Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. I know the answer to this, but I think it's important to continually bring this up and educate the public. So for the benefit of the audience, on the general fund transfer, you show a decrease. If you go to the beginning of your presentation, you show a decrease in the actual appropriations over the 2-year period, but the city transfer amount continues to remain the same. In other words, it's a higher percentage of the adopted budget. Can you explain why that is?
I can explain. 2 years ago, we made an agreement with City Council that we would stabilize the transfer at a specific number, and that's what we've done. So that number has not changed. The actual amount has not changed year to year. And so you're correct. Since revenue has gone down, that it's if it had been a percentage, then that would have gone down. The trend, however, had been just the opposite. That it had been going up, and as things start to go up again, we will still be stable. So the idea was to stabilize that, so both the city and GWP would know exactly how much in dollar value that would be. So you're correct. Yes.
And then the other question, kind of anticipating questions you may get in the future, is in a period of time where you're talking about if you don't get a 3.8% water hike increase, you're tabling capital projects, et cetera, but yet on the other hand, we're moving forward with the AMI project, which is a significant, capital expenditure as well. Can you explain how you intend to explain why you're moving forward with that versus other, if you're in a maintenance mode everywhere else, but yet you're moving forward with the AMI
that's
investment?
Correct. It's a commitment we've made at every level, basically. Plus, we also, as you're aware, received stimulus funding, $20 million. So we are committed both to the city and also now to the federal Department of Energy to continue this project. So yes, we have major commitments in that regard.
But the federal money only covers part of the cost of that program.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Can we go back to slide 9? That's the electric utility financial trend. If you look at power management for budget 2010, it was 167 million. For forecast, it's 116. So all the costs came in except 1 month. I know you mentioned that earlier. So my first question is, what did we cut? Why did we spend so much less? Now, my second question is, given that result, why are we budgeting 149 next year?
Well, I'll try to answer that for you.
Okay.
First off, the difference between the 167 and the 116 is a result of the fact that there was a decrease in the cost of power in the marketplace, both in the cost of producing power as well as the fuel cost.
Okay.
Substantial decreases. And this also impacted us on the revenue side. So that was the major reason why that went down substantially.
Okay.
The increase between the 116 and the 149.6 is we do project slight increases in the cost of fuel and purchase power in the upcoming year. In addition, we're anticipating greater activity on our wholesale operations. So our wholesale operations are also embedded in that 149.6 number. So
Increased activities in wholesale, wouldn't that increase our revenue and not necessarily increase expenses?
it's both sides because
Both sides.
because when you purchase power, you're also, when you sell it, you're going to have a gross number on one side and a gross number on another side. So let's say you buy something for $100 and you sell it for 110. You're going to show both sides of your equation, and the net will be in the bottom line. So that's why you'll see an increase in the approved budget number of the 233, and also an increase in the 149.
And the trend for the increase in fuel that you're anticipating, where are you getting that information?
That information is coming from our power production group. They are doing trends, and they work with outside consultants. They have a model that they use to determine what the costs are. And that was something that Mr. Linz talked about earlier when he talked about the hedging program,
Right.
and trying to identify what our cost buying opportunities are. We do anticipate that it's going to go up. If, in fact, it does not go up, and these numbers aren't as high as they're going to be, then you're going to see less revenues and also less expenses. And so we may not have the same bottom line. We may end up having a shorter bottom line than we do now. But it's very hard to predict the market.
Right.
What we are doing is we have a complicated model that we use, and we also use consulting people that assist us in identifying what we think the trends going out are. And so we're doing the best that you possibly can to determine what the future is going to look like. But again, market conditions can change, and things definitely can either go up or down from there.
Right.
Let me add, on the 116, part of that drop from the 167, or actually from the 142, was due also to a substantial decrease in usage. We had a decrease in usage on the electric side due to two issues. One's the economy in general, and secondly, because last summer was relatively cool. So we sold less. So that 116 is a function of a number of things. It's decreased
okay.
usage and decreased fuel costs.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a question on the same page there, and actually some of your discussion may have gone over this, but your actual for 2009 in revenue was 216.3, and your forecast shows that it declined by roughly 30 million, but you're projecting in 2011 an increase of 50 million, which is over a quarter of the amount that came in. And given the impression I have that the economy is not going to be rebounding in a robust way in the next year. How comfortable do you feel with that increase in revenue that you're projecting? It strikes me intuitively as being overly optimistic.
Well, I think we're projecting just a very small, like 1% increase in our actual sales. The biggest portion of where we're seeing the revenue increase would be in the wholesale activity. So we're anticipating it to be in the wholesale side of the business, not the retail side of the business.
Excuse me, and yet the wholesale for the past year went down below your projection.
It went below the projection, that's correct.
Yeah. I'm just afraid here that we may be setting ourselves up for trouble in the next year if we're overly optimistic, but...
I want to mention the best.
Yeah, there are a number of other things that we have now done in the last few months, actually, to increase wholesale revenue. One was that we have sold renewable energy credits to our neighbors in Pasadena.
Right.
And that alone will bring in $5 million.
Okay.
So, and that's included, and that's for this fiscal year that we're in now, and that is included in wholesale sales, and we're looking to do some more of that type of thing. So, while it appears to be overly optimistic, we've taken a much more aggressive stance.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Some other question here.
Okay, just have a few more items.
I do have one more
Ms.
question.
Chen, go ahead.
Page 17. Utility Operations Center, budgeted 2009-10 was 14.9 million. Projected is 5.3.
The Utility Operations Center has a 5-year plan, and if we were to build out the entire 5-year plan, it's about almost $50 million plan to build a new training center, a new operations center, put new walls, entranceway in there. What we've actually done is pushed out almost the entire expenditure, except for those things that we absolutely have to do because of the new flyway, they call it, over to the Disney and DreamWorks campus. So we had to put new walls, new security improvements, a new entrance into the UOC. And so what you end up seeing is that's about that $5 million. Everything else has been pushed out. So our original budget was a phased-in approach to do that entire 5-year plan. That's now been pushed. So that's why you see that much higher number in the original budget, but that's not where we are.
Right, yeah, because I see the cut in the actual plus 1 month projected, and then also approved next year is still 5.6.
Right.
So you have done the cut mainly because of logistics, but not because you're trying to cut budget throughout? Or?
Oh, no, it's all for budget.
Okay,
No.
all right. So you're already making a conscious
Yes.
effort in cutting.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
I just have a few items before we move on to the other ones. The page 12 and 15, where you list your expenses as in a pie chart. First question is, how are they compared to the other utilities? Are we pretty much close to what other utilities are spending as a proportion of their expenses?
That's a very good question. I have not done any kind of comparison at this point with other sister utilities. That would be an interesting study to undertake, and we could do something like that to determine how we are. We could take data from different everybody's annual report and then do some analysis. I think it'd be a study worthy of doing some benchmarking on.
Yeah, I agree with that, because that leads to my second question, because it pertains to the water increase again. Sorry about that. And slide 15, where you actually have the water expenses.
What page is that on?
Slide 15, which is the other
Okay.
pie chart.
Okay.
So this relates to when people talk about waterway increases, because basic economics, as we all know, we either have increased revenue or reduce expenses so that we don't have to raise rates. So given that whatever revenue that we project is accurate, the only thing we can look at is our expenses. And so if I look at this pie chart, I mean, the thing that pops out to me is salaries and benefits and also non-labor O&M, where some of the parts where we can actually reduce, because I don't think we can do anything with the fund transfer. And so given that Mr. Stike had earlier mentioned that staff reduction is pretty much is being considered, but we're at the bare bones already. Can you explain to me what the non-labor O&M expenses are that we can actually look at, maybe potentially reduce further if we're actually only spending 10% of it?
Well, the non-labor O&M expenses is primarily contractual labor. For example, on the water side, we have a valve exercising program where you have a contractor that goes out and makes sure that all the valves are operating correctly, and so they have to be tested, and then if they need to have repair, that they do the specialized repair that's required. There are a number of other types of activities. I'm not the expert in the water side, but they have different types of expenses related to maintenance of the operation. Another one is the relining of the tanks. You have to have specialized labor to do that type of work. So, in essence, if we get into that mode where we have to do cutting, I would say everything that's on the slide, other than the actual blue area, where we really don't have any discretion, would have to be looked at to see if, in fact, cuts could be made in those particular areas.
Yeah, because that's something that, like I mentioned, you're going to get asked, where can you cut, because a lot of people don't want to raise rates. And unfortunately, if we need to raise rate, we need to make a very compelling case on whatever we're doing that we can't really cut anymore, and now we have to look at rates.
From my perspective, I think that the utility is right now in a very conservative mode. As you can see, last year they budgeted a negative loss position. And this year we've budgeted a net break-even position. So from a rate perspective, I think they're doing everything they possibly can. If in fact the rate doesn't get approved, then they definitely will have to look at each of these components very carefully and do an analysis and prioritize what needs to be cut.
Okay. What about the revenue side? Can we increase local production and distribution and decrease MWD rates? Would that have an impact?
In prior presentations, Mr. Kabunas has actually shown that we have increased our groundwater production over the past 2-3 years, and that's an area that we look to continue to improve because we would like to have less reliance on MWD.
But an interesting side note, when we went through our budget development over the last few months and looked at what we would have to push out in order to bring the budget down to a basically bare bones, as I mentioned, we've pushed out a lot of projects. What got pushed out, unfortunately, were the 2 wells that we're developing right now. And so we had to take a look at that and say, well, but that goes contrary to what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring in more local water. So we've brought those 2 wells back for the moment into our short-term budget at the expense of some other projects. But again, we're going to have to take a look at that, and that if we don't get a rate increase, we're going to be sitting right on the edge of whether we can afford to do those wells now or whether we have to push those out. So everything starts to come together as you take a look at these things.
Mr. Amin? Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify one point Mr. Chairman brought up. Correct me if I'm not wrong, but it isn't outside of the realm of possibility, should the City Council agree with it, that they could decrease the general fund if they were convinced that, you are at the bare bones and that they still did not want to do the rate increase. They could capture that amount from the general fund transfer if they decided.
Yeah, it's up to the City Council to make the decision on the amount of the transfer.
I guess I was referring to the point that you made, Mr.
Yeah, because I assume that because they need that fund as well for general services to run the city, that I don't think they would, it's always their option, but the chances of that happening, I think, might be very slim. So, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, one last question on slide 13, if you can go to that. And looking under your column, Budget 2010, your total net income is shown as being $3.2 million short. That was projected at the beginning of last fiscal year, if I understand that correctly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the forecasted amount, which is the amount you anticipate based on 11 months of experience, is a shortfall of only $800,000.
That's correct.
And a natural question that arises is if we anticipated the $3.2 million shortfall, and we actually had a much smaller shortfall of a fourth, I guess, of the original amount, why would we have a problem with water rates and need to go for an increase?
The 3.2 was based on two issues. It was based on a $2.5 million a grant that we had expected from the state that was rescinded in the middle of the year. So at that point in time, we made the decision to continue on. This was for the chromium-6 plants, and we made the decision to go on to continue to pay for that with our own reserves, which would take it down $2.5 million. The additional $0.7 million was based on the fact that at that point we knew that we would have reduced revenue from reduced usage. We did not know how much, however. So that budget, that negative 3.2, was based on those two things. As we went through the year, we reduced our costs, as you can see. So we started to reduce to offset that because we had expected to get the $2.5 million restored, and even though the state said they would restore it, they never paid it. So from a dollar standpoint, we still had to make that up. So what we did is we reduced our costs dramatically during the year to make up for that, but we still ended up in a negative position. So we have done everything we can to narrow that down, and we're still in a negative position, which is not where we can't be there for long.
I guess my question is, it seems that we knew from this outset of the last fiscal year that we'd probably have to have a rate increase. Is that correct? Or
we knew that once we asked people to reduce, that if that actually occurred, we would. In fact, we made that clear last year. It's in all of our reports that we put forth. That is correct.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I think that's kind of important for the public to be aware of.
Correct.
Mr. President, that's all I have. Thank you.
That's all I have, too, at this point. I think we're at almost at 6 o'clock, and since we have to be out of it in 15 minutes, is there any suggestions about proceeding on, or do you want to move on to maybe potential old business or new business?
I would suggest that we allocate some amount of time on old business to talk about the proposed rate increase on the water side.
And about the joint study session.
Yes. So I would make a motion maybe that we have 15 minutes here. If we could cover something maybe in 5 minutes and allocate 10 minutes to the discussion of old business.
How long would item 4C take, Ms. Haddad?
4C, 5 minutes?
We do 5? Okay, we do that first, and then what about Mr. Keenan too? 4D, how long will you take?
I should, just to be official.
Item 4C, legislative and regulatory update. Lana Haddad.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. So given the compressed time frame, I will move quickly, but hopefully not talk too fast. So what I want to do is very quickly give you a higher level picture of the situation in D.C. and then sort of talk a little bit about the state level politics with special attention to two bills of note, which is SB 722, which is this year's renewable portfolio, and then AB 2415, just a brief mention on the energy storage bill. On the federal level, due to a very compressed time frame there, facing election year, it's very unlikely at this point that we're going to see any climate change or energy policy work coming out of D.C., and that is actually due to a number of different factors, including the fact that we're facing an election year. So historically, they have a recess in October. There has been a shift in the balance of powers that's significant enough with the recent death of Senator Robert Byrd. The Democrats no longer have a filibuster-proof majority, so that opens them up to a lot more contention when it comes to energy bills. There is also other really pressing large bills and issues facing the national government, which is primary one is the financial services sector reform bills, and as well things like the BP oil spill, which are taking up a lot of time, and the Supreme Court nomination. Basically what that means for California and Glendale Water and Power is that there is an increased focus for me in Sacramento, because the bills that are happening there are going to impact us immediately, and there's not going to be the specter of preemption on the federal level. So as a result of that energy and climate gridlock, what we're looking at on the regulatory front, and this is part of that AB 32 update that you're looking for, is that progress is moving ahead at a very steady pace at CARB. with regards to both cap and trade and the RES. So with cap and trade, one of our major concerns has been cost containment so that we minimize the rate impact for our consumers. As a result, the CARB staff did hold a cost containment workshop last week. And in fact, the RES preliminary draft is going forward to the board on next Thursday. So the RES is important to us partly because it establishes a regulatory 33% renewable electricity standard. That is actually different from the existing and soon-to-be mandated RPS, which is the legislative version of the renewable portfolio standard, partly because it does have some differing obligations and allowances actually for POUs, one of which is very important to us because it might allow us to count our Hoover, our large hydro, as part of our renewable electricity standard. It also establishes multi-year compliance intervals and allows for more flexible trading options of renewable electricity credits or energy credits. To segue very quickly to the legislative realm, SB 722, which is this year's RPS bill, was very stagnant right up until the deadline before it needed to go to the policy committee on July 2nd. And we saw a real flurry of activity around this particular bill, partly because there's a lot of political pressure to get this pushed through. This bill would establish a 33% RPS statewide with interim deadlines for POUs, which would be 20% by 2013. It's actually 2012 for IOUs, 25% at 2016, and 33% by 2020. This bill is slightly different from the previous bill of last year, SB 14, because instead of addressing deliverability issues, which we were facing and we were very concerned about, this one establishes a three-bucket system. So 75% of the allowed RPS would have to come from sources that are interconnected to or delivered within an hour to California balancing authorities. We still are having a little problem with the hourly limitations that they are including in the language, so we're addressing that with CMUA. The second budget allows for 10% of renewable energy credits, and the third percent is reserved for what they're calling firmed and shaped energy, so basically out-of-state resources that we are utilizing. The energy storage bill, which is AB 2514, we are actually opposed to that as consistent with CMUA and SCAPA. That bill actually requires that we would have to invest a certain amount of money into energy storage, but it would be mandated and there'd be a reporting requirements that, and we just feel the technology is not quite ripe for that. As you all know, GWP is going ahead and sort of voluntarily doing energy storage with our ICE energy contracts, but the idea that Sacramento would be mandating this on us at such an early stage is a little uncomfortable, and we're actually opposed to that. We talked a little bit in the report about net metering and feed-in tariff. I know Mr. Basson has some further information. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to it today, but just to emphasize the point in the report, I indicated that many of the legislation, there was a flurry of activity around that at the beginning of the legislative cycle, but in Sacramento, they seem to have been died down or a little bit stalled. But the second rule in Sacramento is no bill is ever dead. So we'll soon see what happens as the deadline gets nearer. So in conclusion, that's going to be the information that I shared today. It is really fast, so I apologize for that. But I did want to say I do have an apology for the seeming disjointedness of the report. It's very reflective of sort of the nature of what's going on in Sacramento and D.C. And I did want to ask all of you to see if there was some way that I could present this information to you in a way that was more useful to you. My goal is to serve you as best as we can. All of our goal at GWP is to really bring you the information that's most useful. And I'm wondering if there's something else that I can bring to you or bring it in a different format that would make it more helpful for you.
Suggestions or comments?
I don't have any right now, but I'll keep that in mind, and I'll see if I can email something to you.
Thank you. That would be really helpful.
I'll keep that in mind, too, because what I'd like to see is also the position of GWP, CMUA, and the City Council on some of these reports so that we can, if the city opposes something, then we want to be the voice of that as well.
Okay.
I'll provide comment afterwards as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I think the update is great. I see the printout here. Was this emailed to us? I didn't see this.
Yes.
It was? Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Will I enter my minutes?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. There's one question here.
I have one question for the director. If we have an increase of a renewable portfolio standard up to 33%, and if we've been divesting some of our green energy credits, would we be, what would the position of the utility be to meet that 33%?
We are, even though we're selling some of our credits, it's short term. So we are in a very, very good position at the moment.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And next, please.
Item 4D, Smart Grid Update, Craig Keenan.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Craig Keenan, Smart Grid Project Sponsor. I'll make this quick. We submitted our 3 plans to DOE, the cybersecurity plan, our project implementation plan, and our program metrics and reporting plan. We received comments back. We'll be resubmitting these 3 documents back to DOE and hopefully get final approval in the next 2 weeks. The comments mostly were pretty minor. So some of them were like, you don't have a date on a page, and some were a little more elaborate, but we're confident we're going to meet their requirements. As far as the AMI project, we're still looking to complete the project July next year. Right now, we're conducting training, completing our proof of concept testing. There's a couple critical areas we need to meet in the next month to make our production start of October. And that's to complete the backhaul system, the Tropos Wi-Fi radio system that we're putting in, and to complete our interfaces between the MDMS system and Harris. If we get those done in the next, say, month and a half, we'll be on schedule. Should those slip a little, then our project will have to slip, because we can't go to production without having the backhaul and not having the IT interfaces working properly and fully tested. As far as our customer engagement program, we did send out an RFI to get responses from companies for in-home displays and other customer technologies. We got 9 responses. We're in the process of evaluating them. The goal, we're going to do a customer focus group on the first week of August. And the goal is to put together an RFP and to select a vendor to provide those devices for our customers. The other project we're working on is the demand response for our large customers. We've basically got the design of the program finalized. We're going to be running a test of that design over the next week, and then we're going to go out to recruit customers to participate in the pilot. The Ice Energy Thermal Energy Storage Project, we've installed our first ice bear over at Perkins. We have another 3 we're going to be installing at city facilities this week. We've begun customer recruitment. We've surveyed about 40 customer buildings. We have 10 customers signed up, have signed easements already, and we'll start rolling that out. The goal is about 210 spare units over the next couple of years. That's the update.
Any questions?
Did I understand you correctly to state the proof of concept study is completed?
The proof of concept, we've installed the meters,
Yeah.
but we have to go through testing.
Okay.
And we have to finalize the interfaces between the MDMS system and our customer information system.
Okay.
Because we don't want to go to production unless we know we can produce accurate bills. So we have to go through all that testing.
When it is completed, I think what we'd be interested in finding out is if the anticipated savings in water and power look like they're going to more than offset the cost of the investment. That's kind of a fundamental issue. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Question? Oh, go ahead.
Can you give us a quick update on, I know you had formed a community advisory group?
Yes.
To engage the community as you start rolling out. What is the status of those activities?
We've had a few meetings with the advisory group. The last meeting, there wasn't a lot of participation. We took another look at that, and that's when we decided to combine it with, say, the focus group for the in-home displays to give the members of that committee a more active role so they could help with decisions on technologies, what they would like to see, and all indications are our participation at the next meeting will be quite a bit more people there, more active participation. We kind of expected that lower participation because it is summer. And there's not a lot of activity with the project right now. We've put in the meters and we're testing, and we expect it to pick up. So once they have some role to play, more active role and more decision-making kind of role.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. Want to proceed? Is there discussion to continue on, or should we just skip to old business? We have maybe 10 minutes left.
If I may, I understand there's a desire to consider water rates under old business, but because that's not specifically agendized, we can't have a substantive discussion of that issue at this particular meeting. So you might keep that in mind as you make your decision as far as continuing items or not.
I think the comment was just to discuss some of the joint study session items that we can refer to for the next meeting, to agendize maybe potential items.
Which would go then under new business as part of your discussion of, or agenda forecast, I suppose.
Okay. Do you want to do that?
Yes, I think it would be important for us to talk about that, seeing that that's an issue of great interest to the council. And so I would make a motion that we postpone the remaining agenda items until the next meeting and reserve the remainder of the discussion for
old and new business.
Yes, old and new business on the agenda forecast. Yeah.
If I may, I want to clarify that what you, I assume you mean is that you want to have those items considered as part of the next regular agenda.
That is
Not
correct.
at the beginning before the regular agenda next meeting, but as part of the agenda.
That is correct.
Okay.
Can I also add that the solar power and feed-in tariffs be modified for the next meeting on the agenda? Is that a request that can be made here? So that to modify, instead of just feed-in tariff, but maybe to talk about the potential AB 811 program and how that could benefit the solar program. I'm not sure. That I was going to talk about on a new business as well, that the LA County Energy Program has started that the City Council just sign on, so that we can talk about the solar power in addition to the program that the LA County has in place.
We can add that, yes.
So substantively, you're amending his motion, so you just need a second, and then you can take a vote.
So we want to have a second to Commissioner Miller's motion first.
He made a motion to continue the discussion of those items to the next meeting. You amended that by adding that you wanted to revise one of those items. So someone needs to second that motion. And
Second it.
Okay.
And then you just need to take a vote.
I take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Okay.
2 minutes
So let's move on to the next item for those remaining agenda. Then we'll move on to item 6. George?
Item 6, old business.
Is there any old business?
The issue of the water rate increase, we can discuss that briefly, or what's the limit on the scope?
You can discuss it very briefly. You can't really get into a substantive discussion of it.
Okay. Is there to be a study session regarding it?
Well, you can refer to the study session that took place a few weeks ago. What occurred?
I would suggest that the commission attempt to assist staff in identifying ways in which we could help it recover or reduce its shortfall. That's the main thing I would like to propose.
Yes, and I'd like to echo that as well. During the study session, it was appropriate under old business that some of the council members were concerned on what options that would be proposed if GDP staff comes back to them on whether it's going to be staying at 3.8% increase, or it's going to be less or more, or if what proposal or options that staff will bring back to them. So we would like to maybe to have additional options looked at, as City Council was referring to.
And discussed here at Commission.
We'd have to have another session of the commission, I think, to discuss that. So,
Do you think would be another study session would be necessary just for the commission before it goes to City Council?
yes, I would believe so. If we're to go over these, if we're to come up with some additional options and present that to staff.
Let's ask Mrs. Steiger. I mean, was the opportunity to have a commission study, a special study session to come up with these different options that you could potentially come up with?
We can do it two ways. We can do it through a study session, or we can just do it at the next regular scheduled meeting. We can agendize that as something to discuss at the meeting.
Will there be enough time if we schedule it for the next meeting for council to be properly informed and to incorporate any input from ratepayers who might be interested?
Yeah, we can, as long as we have it on our regularly scheduled date, there should be no conflict, and I'll make sure that's the case. So we can just go as long as you'd like, or we can start earlier. We can be as flexible as you'd like.
Are you anticipating doing the session on August 2nd?
Yes. And in fact, if you look at the agenda forecast for August 2nd, it's relatively light. So I think we can incorporate the water rate discussion with options along with the AB11 and solar feed-in tariff in that meeting with no problem at all.
Well, it looks like August 2nd has a lot of agenda items already proposed. Maybe you're referring to September. September 1 has...
I think you'd probably want to prioritize the water rates at this point, right, in August, I would assume. Yeah. So we can do that, and if need be, we can move some of the other agenda items off to September.
So when is the end date of Proposition 218 notification?
It's 45-day notification period, and we have not issued it yet. So it'll be, at this point, it'll be probably September, and sometime in September.
So that's acceptable?
Yes, pardon me, go ahead.
No, I said that would work with the August 2nd.
Yeah, I think doing it on August 2nd will work. We may want to look at the time of that day to make sure that we don't have to artificially cut off early.
I'll check that, but I'm certain since it's a regularly scheduled meeting, there should be no time constraints.
Okay.
But I'll make sure.
Okay.
Because one of the concerns about options, the council was interested in the tier rate structure, and I was assuming that takes a while to develop.
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if next month would be sufficient time to even discuss that.
Well, if you recall, at the joint session, the direction that we received from both the council and the commission was to come back at the time after we have complied with the 218, at that time to also come back with our proposal as to how we're going to move forward to do a complete rate restructure. The rate restructure itself can't happen in 45 days, but at least our proposal on how to do it can. So that's what we projected to do.
So any more discussion about old business on the joint study session? No? Any other old business? Nothing? Okay. We'll think of something later. And then new business then. Sorry, go ahead,
Item
George.
number 7, new business.
Any new business? So I guess there's one item that I mentioned before was the Los Angeles County Energy Program, where the City Council just approved City of Glendale participation in the program. So hopefully we'll get some ideas of how the citizens in Glendale can participate and how they can actively improve their home with solar energy or energy efficiency investments. So that's something that we can look forward to next month.
Yeah. I have one minor issue to bring up.
Go ahead.
Under a new business, I would like to point out, I've noticed that when the TV in this meeting focuses on people that have windows in the background, there's a lot of glare. And I don't know if that can be corrected or not, but for those watching TV, it might be a problem. I just wanted to point that out to whoever handles that.
There are curtains that can...
Yeah, curtains would mitigate the problem. Anyway, that's all. On to the next item.
Curtains. Okay, and then I guess the new business item of diversity of staffing, that we'll potentially get that.
We'll put that on there.
When would you think we'll be?
We can do that. That's
like a simple report, and just the
we'll
basic
have that for
statistics
next,
on the landscape, the current landscape of staffing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any other new business?
I'm sorry, I want to go back to old business. With the new tiered rate design, I understand that it'll take at least 6-9 months from several reportings. I was wondering if there's any way we can make that shorter. Can we hire a consultant, or can we put more people on it? Can we expedite it?
Here's the issue with that. We are going to hire a consultant anyway. I mean, that's a given. The issue is twofold. Number one, it takes 6 months just in general to do that kind of study. But to do it properly, we want to utilize the fact that we now will have a smart grid in place on the water side, because we want to go to water budgeting, which is the very best way to do this. And we now have the opportunity, once we get the data in place, and it'll be 9 months before we have that kind of data readily available to us to start to be able to do that. So we wanted to combine the two. Probably the quickest we could do it, if we let that data go, would probably be 6 months. We could probably, but it wouldn't recognize the whole advantage of putting in the smart grid. So that's why we wanted to push it just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm a little bit concerned, too, with the accuracy of the data, because we're just beginning with the system, and there may be a lot of bugs that we'll need to fix. So I understand we want to include that data in the study, but if there's going to have to be a ramp-up period anyway to get the data accurate, so, I mean, how long do we have to wait for the new tiered rates? So that's kind of my concern.
Well, that's what, and then I'll come right back to our philosophy.
Okay.
I'll be very honest about this. Our whole philosophy was that we needed a 3.8% rate increase to get us through 1 year, and at the end of that year, we would completely restructure rates, utilize the smart grid data, and then move forward with a much more progressive rate structure. To do it, we could do the rate restructuring in 6 months, but to me, it wouldn't be a complete process, knowing that we have the data right in front of us. So that's why we're trying to get through this year on this.
With the 3.8?
We'll bring that back to you. We'll bring all those options back.
Mm-hmm.
But that's our thought process.
Yeah, I think the philosophical options in front of us were what you mentioned, Mr. Steiger, as well as saying, well, rather than penalizing those who have been conserving along with those who have not, to essentially absorb the 3.8 somewhere and go straight to a restructured tier. So I think the debate centered around these two approaches, one being the one you mentioned, which is bridging us to the progressive rates versus absorbing it so that we don't penalize people who have conserved along with those who don't, in fear of the mixed message that sends. So
that's correct.
I look forward to the discussions at our next meeting around these issues.
And we'll bring that all forth.
Any new business? Okay, then next item, please.
Item number 8, agenda forecast.
So I guess we're moving a lot of the items from August to September so that we can spend more time on the water rate issue. That everyone agree on that? So can I mark some of this up and send it direct to you,
Yes.
Mr. Steiger?
Yes,
about
you can.
Some of the agenda amendments for next item?
Yes, please.
So we have one request to speak, and I think we have about 6 minutes left. So to accommodate the speaker his coming down here today, I think we would just have to make it 3 minutes, though. So, Mr. Amano, 3 minutes.
President Yao, members of the GWP Commission, and city staff, my name is Herbert Molano. I truly appreciate the opportunity that you allow me to speak today. I looked on the web today because I think I remembered that the meeting was today, and I looked for any verification on the web about this meeting, and I didn't see any. I happened to be here because I wanted to speak during the Women's Commission, and then to my surprise, the meeting has been held. Otherwise, I would have come over. And I think this is the type of practice that really hurts significantly concerning our perception of the Commission, of the City Council, and so forth, about informing the public appropriately through the means that is more normally acceptable to us and we expect, is to see it on the web and to say, look, there's a meeting today of GWP. It's unconscionable. I know you didn't have anything to do with it, but I remember vaguely, but I did this morning attempt to locate to see if it was true, and I'd say, okay, then I have it wrong. I shouldn't have to come here, like they did back 200 years ago, and have to walk to the city council's, to the city hall back entrance and see if I can locate it and find it within 70 hours. I mean, this is not appropriate. My issue is this, and it has always been the issue concerning the water rates and what it was presented at the joint meeting last time, which is this, that we don't have to wait for the the smart metering system to be in place for us to bring forward a type of equity that is needed. There's a lot of seniors out there who are getting less and less return on their interest because the finances right now, anybody who has savings are getting very little amount in terms of the revenue that comes in from any type of fixed income investments, if they have it. And I know that when I was helping out Bruce Philpott's campaign last year, I found a tremendous number of families north of the Foothill, with significant financial concerns that tell me that they were not washing even even a couple of times a month, because they were trying to figure out how to conserve on water because they couldn't afford the costs. The cost issue is a significant one to me, and it's one that I've been proposing, and to this day, I need to ask you to please obtain information on the real status concerning the people who cannot afford their utility today, and get an appropriate report. Why is it so difficult to get that? I cannot get it from the City Council. I have to pay tons of money in order to get a simple report that says, what is the impact? By various different usage levels, to see how many people really are being impacted negatively in this incredibly bad economy. And I think that's the basis. I don't think we have to hire consultants and pay them tens of thousands of dollars to come up with a devised structure on how to do rates. To me, it's incredible. I think that is a topic that is pertinent to this commission, and I hope that you move forward with something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments?
I would just like to note, with regard to the posting the agenda, that it was posted in accordance with the Brown Act. Unfortunately, due to some glitch that I don't know what happened, it was not placed on the internet until later in the day. So we apologize for that.
Thank you. And I also saw in the paper as well, if people have the paper. I guess we'll go back to agenda forecast.
I just wanted to add the strategic plan update and the quarterly report on the strategic plan will be included next month, I take it. Okay. And let me express my sorrow to Mr. Milano on this problem that occurred. I agree with you, it is unconscionable, and hopefully it'll be avoided in the future.
And so before we adjourn, I want to announce the next meeting is for Monday, August the 2nd. So do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.